And I'm a systems guy, so I look at things from a global perspective, and I try to see patterns, to see if we can come up with a story that fits. And I read voraciously, so I've been reading all kinds of things, right? And in 2014 January, I decided to do a meditation. So it was 10 days of silence and 8 hours of meditation a day, intense meditation. I think around the 8th day, suddenly all the patterns made sense. There was a story. There is a story of human beings that I can show now, where even Western civilization is part of the big grand picture. Every bit of it is useful for nature. So despite all the mess we have been making it for a purpose. So that's the story that I started writing in Carbon Yoga. It's been 2 years of this. And what I have so far, I've gone through one set of editing and revisions, and then I printed it out because I wanted to give it to a lot of religious leaders as well, because this is a story that connects science and religion. It's an all-encompassing story, okay? But it's basically pattern matching. As a system scientist, I'm doing a pattern matching and showing that there is a positive story that fits the patterns. So to me, yoga is union. Yoga is coming back in alignment with nature, connecting back with nature. It continues the story from Carbon Dharma. Carbon Dharma is like, what are you supposed to be? What should you do? You should become a butterfly. So it's very easy to say, you should do that. Yoga is about how do you get there and why did everything happen so that it fits. If we look at the patterns, actually in 2009, I was in this sanctuary in Karnataka in India, and this sanctuary was started by a couple from New Jersey. The husband is a Punjabi from Punjab, and the wife is a native New Jerseyan. So they decided in 1992 or so that they were sick of this restaurant business that they were running in New Jersey, and they wanted to go and do something for the environment. So they went to Karnataka and they bought this coffee plantation to about 55 acres at that point, and they just tore down the fences and let it go. And over time they bought neighboring coffee plantations, and right now they have about 300 acres of this, and they just tore down the fences and let it go. Let the animals come and do whatever they wanted. And they did some minor planting of things, This sanctuary happens to be in between 3 national forests. But if you go to the national forests, they're all being used by people. So you will see rows and rows of teak trees, and eucalyptus trees, because they harvest the forest and they replant. They replant with things that humans like, not what the animals like. So the animals are trying to get out of there. So they come to this sanctuary and they poop the seeds, and new trees are born. India is so fertile that way. You just have to drop seeds and things come up, right? So I went there in 2009 and it was so dense. You can only walk where the elephants walked, because the elephants have crushed the vegetation to give you a path. And the elephants snap branches off trees and they eat the leaves and throw the branches away, and that is how sunlight comes down to nourish the underbrush. Everything the elephants do is beneficial for the forest. It's helping the forest come back. The elephant eats an entire jackfruit and the seeds come out of the other end with the manure, and new jackfruit trees are born. And the elephants walk miles and miles and they propagate the jackfruits all over. Everything seems to fit beautifully. All the animals had to do was to live, and the forest comes back. And I asked them, so what did you have to do, to make this forest come back? And they said, you just had to prevent people from coming inside. And I said, that's such a horrible story to tell my kids. Why would I tell my kids, you don't belong, I don't belong then, because I was born just 200 miles away from that forest. I was born in the Western Ghats of India, and I said, you say, I don't belong, but you belong. You are sitting there in the house. You're preventing people from coming inside, so you belong, right? So why don't we tell a story where we do belong exactly as we are? The perfection of nature. If you go see that forest, you'll see the perfection of nature. Everything fits beautifully. And at night, you can't even hear each other talk, because there is such a din of crickets and insects buzzing and frogs. We were walking from their house to our quarters where we sleep, and my sister was with me. And there is no light there. So she gave us a solar torchlight to go from there to there. And as we were walking, we were surrounded by insects because they are attracted to the lights. Surrounded by insects, my sister was running because she's afraid of insects. Because you had to open the door to get inside, a whole bunch of insects came in. So I spent like the next 2 hours grabbing insects, putting them in a cup and taking them out and leaving them out. So I had a lot of time to think. Okay? So that was my first clue that it cannot be that nature is so perfect in all respects, 20 to 100 million other species all fitting beautifully, and just make one mistake. That doesn't make any sense. How could she make one mistake? Right? So we have to belong exactly as we are.
But we destroy everything.
We destroy everything, and in the process we are creating a bunch of things. What are we creating? We have created technology. My God, I mean, look at this. Right? This is fancy stuff. You can't get a chimpanzee to do that. No other being can do that. But what is it useful for? Right now it's used to spy on people. Making sure that they know exactly what all 7.4 billion people are doing. Okay? But we are also using it to look at what is happening on Earth. We now have satellite pictures, satellite cameras that see what's going on Earth. We are also using it to tag animals. So we know where the lions are, we know where the tigers are. So you see, slowly we are deploying it for the right purposes. We are actually monitoring the climate of the Earth. And if you look at paleo climate science, you begin to understand that there is something unique about this era in the Earth's history. Not just in human history, in Earth's history, this is a very unique era. Because when the Earth was born, in the middle of the habitable zone around the sun, it was perfectly situated in the middle of the habitable zone around the sun. But the sun is a red dwarf. I mean, sun is a G2V sequence star. So what it does is, over time, the sun gets hotter and hotter and hotter. That's what they do. If you look at other stars, that's what they're doing. So as it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, the Earth is getting pulled closer and closer to the inner edge of the habitable zone. 500 million years ago, the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were anywhere from 5,000 ppm to 50,000 ppm. That's the range they have. The average is maybe 20,000 ppm. Here, today we have 280 ppm. We started out with 280 ppm. Now we are up to 400 ppm and we are screaming that it's too much. It used to be 20,000 ppm 500 million years ago. So over time, as the sun got hotter and hotter, CO2 is like a blanket that the Earth has around her. So she's shedding these blankets. I don't want this, because it's too hot. So now her blankets are so thin that she's very sensitive to anything that happens to the CO2. Like a volcanic eruption, like what happened in the Siberian traps 250 million years ago. It caused the great dying 250 million years ago. And that volcanic traps injected 2,000 ppm of CO2 into the atmosphere in one shot. One shot in nature is like 1,000 years. Over 1,000 years, it injected 2,000 ppm of CO2 into the atmosphere. And that was enough to cause 90% of species to die off. Okay? And it took time for that to come back. Today, if you have a 2,000 ppm shot into the atmosphere, it's finished. Life is finished. So here's this smart lady, okay? Mother Earth is so smart. She said, okay, I have this condition where now my CO2 levels are going up and down, and I'm getting into this ice age and out of ice age and out of ice age. It's so close to zero. I mean, if you get to 50 ppm, planet is finished, life is finished. If it goes up quickly to 2000 ppm, the planet is finished, life is finished. So you need an active feedback mechanism. I'm used to that. I'm an electrical engineer, okay? I have passive feedback and I do active feedback mechanisms. With active feedback, you can do a lot of things that you cannot do with passive feedback. So currently her feedback mechanism for CO2 is based on rock weathering. The rocks accumulate CO2 over time. So if there is an excess, then there is more fertilization of the rocks that happens. And if there is too little, then the rocks just send out CO2. So this is like a thermostat she has for the CO2, which is very, very slow. Take 100,000 years to fix the CO2 in the atmosphere if there is a perturbation. That's what she has. That's her mechanism right now. But it takes time. You look at the past, you see extinction events happening, and it takes time, 100,000 years, 200,000 years before the CO2 comes back to normal and then life starts again. Okay? So this time, you cannot afford such slow feedback, so she had to create a species that can do quick feedback. And that's us. And we are doing it. We are actually deploying all of our instruments. We are already doing it. But to deploy all these instruments, to deploy all this technology, where did the internet come from? The internet came from military. Where did any technology come from? It came from military applications. Okay, I was funded by the military to do everything. Right? Even my PhD was funded by the military. It was all DARPA funded. All fresh technology that we do is to overpower some other people. How did the British overpower Indians? Well, they had science, so they could figure out how to stand farther away and shoot and kill you. And our technology was not good enough to reach them. Right? That's how they won. So you look at everything that we did for technology, it was in conflict, for conflict. So we had to get into conflict to create all this technology. And now we are being woken up and told, you don't have to have any conflicts anymore. Because there is a bigger problem. It's a global problem. This climate change is a global issue. And we are coming together to deal with it. But we have to tell the right stories. If we tell stories that are negative, we tell stories that make people say, you are the worst. You have been destroying the planet. You have been doing this and you have this, that and that. People are not going to change. But this is calling for us to change who we are as human beings, to recognize that we are part of nature. We have been doing something for nature, not against nature. And now we have the capacity to actually bring back the forests. I asked the question, if the whole world goes vegan, how much carbon can be sequestered on land that is freed up from livestock? And I approached about 15 or 18 land carbon experts who work for the IPCC. I got only three replies. And two of the replies were kind of non-committal. But the third reply was from Professor Atul Jain of University of Illinois, who is one of the top land carbon experts. And he said, I have a model and I think I can figure out what you're talking about. I can answer your question. But why do you want to know? And I told him, I'm looking for how much can be sequestered. So I know if a lot can be sequestered, then I know that nature wasn't making a mistake. So I can tell the story that nature was doing this on purpose. And he said, okay. So he had his grad student look at it, analyze the problem, and he called me up like a month later and he said, I have to double check the numbers, this is just too big. And he double checked it and he said, yeah, it's right, he's right. So we wrote a paper and presented it at the AGU conference last year. Everyone who came by said, you're right, but I don't think people will do it. Because the numbers were so good. So if the whole world goes vegan, you free up roughly 35% of the land area of the planet that's currently used for grazing. You can free that up to reforest. And what we did for reforestation was we said, if there used to be a forest there in 1800, put that forest now and let it bloom to maturity and see how much carbon gets sequestered. And it turns out that on 41% of that land, there used to be forests in 1800. So it was freshly deforested since 1800. And on that 41% of land, we can sequester more carbon than we have added to the atmosphere since 1750. So we can sequester 265 gigatons of carbon, whereas we have added 240 gigatons of carbon to the atmosphere since 1750. So we can literally heal the planet and reverse climate change. Then I asked, why isn't someone doing this? It's so obvious. It's staring at you in front of your eyes. And all these climate scientists who came by and saw my poster at the AGU, they all acknowledged, you're right, but is it going to happen? I said, wait a minute. If you know it, why aren't you saying it? Why aren't you telling people that this can be done? The environmental impact of veganism is fairly well known. I mean, I could tell even at the AGU, just watching these scientists go by, and talking to them. I had the head of NCAR National Center for Atmospheric Research, come by. He and his wife came by and he said, "You're right. But I don't know how I can get people to do this, and how people can do this." And to me, it's systemic. So the environmental NGOs that you know of are the ones who have a lot of money, because they are the ones who are able to send their messages out. Well, they have a lot of money because they don't talk about it. If they talked about it, they won't have so much money. You know what I mean? The system that's the conspiracy, right? So this is really what's happening. So the ones with the money are the ones who don't talk about it. And the ones who are talking about it, like the Center for Biological Diversity, they talk about it, but they're all dependent on membership money, and they get maybe $20 per person. And how much can they really do with that?
I found the environmental organizations that are locally based tend to be a lot more reachable for personal action kind of issues.
Right.
The higher level ones are hyper-focused on policy.
Right. It's always good to go local, because locally you can get things to change, much easier than from the top down. This again was the big question, right, in Cowspiracy. If you watched Cowspiracy, everybody watched it?
No,
No. You haven't?
I haven't watched.
Watch Cowspiracy on Netflix if you have Netflix.
Yeah, I haven't watched it.
We funded Cowspiracy. I was one of the executive co-producers of Cowspiracy.
Yeah, I was gonna watch them, but I didn't need to. I am trying to start a mini forest in my backyard.
Yeah, we're all vegan here, and we've all know about the animal rights issues, but Cowspiracy is pretty scary, actually.
What Cowspiracy showed us was that people knew, people in power, they really do know that this is happening. They do know that veganism is a great way to address it, but they don't say it. They don't want to say it. They went to all these different environmental organizations and even the government, and the government doesn't want to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. And you say, why is that? I've come to the conclusion that it is systemic. They don't want to talk about it because it is going to upset the current socioeconomic system. And because the socioeconomic system currently employs 1 billion people or more directly in animal agriculture. Okay? And the byproducts of animal agriculture, like the skin and the fat and all this other stuff, the brains and whatever it is that we don't use as food, is used for all kinds of other things, for cosmetics and for leather, for clothing, for shoes, you name it. So the meat and dairy industry is essentially subsidizing all these other industries. So if suddenly everybody goes vegan, which is under our control, people can do this tomorrow if they wanted to, right? You are going to topple the entire socioeconomic system. This is a little like what happened in the 20th century, early 20th century in India. In India, Gandhi came and he said, everybody change your clothes. He convinced everybody in India to change their clothes, to not buy any more British clothes and just make clothes at home, khadi clothes, and wear them. This was the khadi movement. He started in 1918. And within 12 years, the mightiest empire that the world has ever seen was on its knees, begging to negotiate with Gandhi. Because he showed people that they have so much power that they can shake the economic might of the British Empire. And the British Empire had no choice because the textile industry was the largest industry in England at that time, and it went bankrupt. So there were all these mills closing down in Lancashire County, and Manchester mills were closing down. So they had a round table conference with Gandhi. They were trying to negotiate with him. Then they invited him to London for the second round table conference. He went there, and he went and talked to all the textile mill workers who had lost their jobs. So they know that we have the power. 100 years ago, it was the textile industry. Today, it is the animal agriculture industry. Okay, we have the power to change the system, but they are frightened that we will discover it, and we are discovering it. Okay, they are frightened that we are discovering it because they don't know what will happen to this entire socioeconomic system that they have created. It's going to fall apart. And to me, it has to fall apart, but it shouldn't fall apart with nothing in its place. There has to be another system that we have to build. And I don't see the current system changing to become the new one. It's like asking a caterpillar, how do you become a butterfly? And the caterpillar says, well, I can just go do liposuction slim down, take some plastic wings and stick it on my side, and I'll be a butterfly. No. That's what will happen if you try to do it to the current system. Okay? You really have to go into a cocoon. You have to do a chrysalis. You have to go do a new way of living. You have to try it out. You have to figure out what works, what doesn't work. Do it in a way that people can replicate it everywhere in a distributed fashion. So I looked at, for instance, how transformations in human civilization had happened in the past. And I noticed something. Every time there was a major transformation in human civilization, 3 things changed. We changed the way we communicate. We changed the way we used energy, type of energy we used. And we changed the way we ate. All 3 things changed. So first was fire. We discovered fire. Okay? It changed us as human beings. That was the energy change. We discovered fire. And for communication, we started talking to each other. So speech happened around the same time as fire. And cooking was the change in food. So we discovered we could cook things and eat them and make them edible for us. The second major revolution was the agricultural revolution. And there again, we harnessed animals as energy. We used writing for communication. That was a major change. Writing became common at that time. And you'll notice that it happened throughout the world, in different parts. Independently, humans started writing. Humans started doing agriculture. Okay? For food, we started raising our own crops instead of relying on nature for our food. So that was the food change. The third was the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, it was fossil fuels for energy. And for communication, it was the printing press. We could actually print and disseminate to people. And for food, we took the animals that we had harnessed for agriculture and we started raising them just for food. So the whole idea of factory farms and all came from the Industrial Revolution. Today, we are undergoing exactly the same kind of revolution. It is massive. In the past, every revolution concentrated power in fewer and fewer hands, if you notice. Because fossil fuels had to be gotten from one place in the Middle East to everywhere. So someone was in charge of that and he became powerful. Today, it's a distributed revolution that's happening. Solar energy is falling on our heads everywhere. You just collect it and use it. You don't have to depend on somebody from the Middle East to send it to you. The sun is everywhere. For communication, it's the internet. Everybody can make their own videos and put it on the internet, and they can become the next big phenomenon on the internet. Anybody, right? So it's like power. The power is being distributed to everybody. And for food, it's veganism. So you stop using animals for food completely. So you sort of transition out of that, and suddenly no one can control you. The power is now in your hands. So you have to now create a socio-economic system which is compatible with this, where power is also distributed among us. And if I look at how power is being concentrated today in the socio-economic system, it comes down to currency. The way currency is being distributed, created out of thin air by banks. There's nothing underlying the currency. It's out of thin air it comes up. It's just a number in a computer. And then they give it to you as a loan. And they tell you, return the loan with interest. And they never issue currency for the interest. And because they don't issue for the currency for the interest, you have to compete with somebody else who got a loan and get it from him. So you're fighting with each other. Okay? Or you have to grow the economy. When you grow the economy, there's more currency being issued and everybody is happy. This is why economic growth is so central to our system. The economy is already bigger than what the planet can support, and still they want to double it in 30 years. You said something's wrong with you. And this is what it is. Do it this way.
Are you aware of any mass movements in India or in the US or in other places in Spain? Because this is also a problem with the system that we live in. If we come up with ideas and solutions under the system we live in, which is measured by profit, money, and capitalism, especially like in India, the way that things are growing, are you aware if any of these more political movements, are they getting closer to the other religious groups who now assume this position of veganism as being an alternative to deal with a lot of problems we have these days, as environmental issues and like with animal rights and stuff.
Right. I don't see the current system becoming what new system should be by itself. I mean, it's not going to happen by itself. It's going to have to be forced by what Buckminster Fuller said, which is you don't change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. That's what he also tried to do. But he tried to do in the 60s. In the 60s, people were scared that they're going to succeed. Okay? And the industries then did this. And 1968 was a major year in the 60s where a lot of things got killed and they reverted back to the old way of doing things. The Martin Luther King got killed. Robert F. Kennedy got killed. These were all people who were saying the right things. And they were serious. They were actually implementing it. So they all got assassinated. And then the Powell Memo came out in 1972 that gave the corporations the blueprint for how to take over government. 1972 was also the year that they passed the Sunshine Law in the US. A lot of things start from the US these days because that's the head of the empire, so to speak. In the US, the Sunshine Law is an amazingly clever way of grabbing power from the Congress. What it did was, it said, all congressional votes have to be public, transparent. You have to be transparent as a congressman. And everybody said, yeah, everybody has to be transparent. But you know what happens when you have a transparent voting mechanism? Is that votes get bought. Because they know how you voted. They'll say, wait a minute, I gave you money, you didn't vote the way I wanted. So next time you're not going to get my money. So it grabs power from the congressman into the hands of the lobbyists who have the money, who are actually funding the elections. You see? That Sunshine Law was key to make the old system become more and more concentrated in the hands of corporations. This is why our voting is normally secret. Nobody should know how you voted. Because otherwise they can come and tell you, I'll exact punishment on you for voting the way you did. I believe that everything that happens for the best. Everything that happened for the best. And everything that's happening is happening for the best. So that's my philosophy, and I try to prove that here. And I said 1960s was not the right time for this transformation to happen, for the caterpillar to become the butterfly. It wasn't ready. Because in 1968, you did not have the internet. And without the internet, you cannot do direct democracy.
Social media is a huge platform for us to make the revolution happen. So internet is the way to spread out the message up there,
Right.
But still you gotta be careful because the ones who actually have power and all this technology in their hands, they can just take it away.
Yeah, that's why they hate Snowden's guts. Edward Snowden was a traitor to them because what did he do? He revealed their secrets. And what was their secret? Their secret was that if you have good encryption, they have no clue what the hell you're talking about. That's what he revealed. That's why they hate him. Because he showed the people that if you have good encryption as the basis of all your networking, then they cannot spy on you. They spy on you, but they get garbage. And it takes them years, hundreds of years to decipher that garbage because encryption can be made really strong. And all along, they had this mystique about them. The NSA has secret techniques to undo your encryption. They had this mystique, so people were always scared. Encryption is not useful because the NSA can anyway figure it out. What Snowden revealed was that that's not true. The emperor has no clothes. That's why they hate him. That's why they're going to kill him if he comes anywhere near the US. Then 200 years ago, we started doing industrialization with fossil fuels. And as a result, now we have increased the temperature by 1 degree C. Why did we do that? In my opinion, we did that because we couldn't continue anymore with deforestation. There were not many forests left. So it was a good thing we did this. But now we are building all this technology using fossil energy, which is like ancient forest energy. And now we have all the technology we need to create an equitable human society around the world. And we can now return the forests back. Okay? When we return the forests back, we will bring the temperature back down to constant again. We are the thermostat for the planet.
Orbit 350 is supposed to be your turning point. What does that mean?
So Jim Hansen has said that you have to bring the CO2 levels back to 350 ppm if you don't want to trigger other tipping events like the methane in the Arctic and so on. And we are at 400. But I told you that we can sequester 265 gigatons of carbon in forests compared to 240 that we've added to the atmosphere. The CO2 in the atmosphere was 280 ppm. So meaning we have the power to bring it back to 350 easily. We can do that. But as we reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere, some of the CO2 in the ocean is going to come out. It's going to bubble out. And that's only 40% of the land area that we're going to release back. The other 60% also used to be forests before 1800. We've been deforesting like crazies for 10,000 years, okay? The Sahara Desert was a man-made desert, in my opinion. They think it's because of North African monsoons, but the North African monsoons, as you deforest, you're actually going to kill the monsoons as well. So if you look at where the Sahara Desert exists today, it's where the ancient civilizations of the world were. Egyptian, Babylonian, Sumerian, Persian, Indus Valley, and to China. It's a contiguous desert. And that used to be the Fertile Crescent. And we blame the rains. The rains stopped. That's why it became a desert. No. We cut down the trees, therefore the rain stopped. So what we know from climate science is that roughly 6,000 years ago, humans were strong enough to change the climate. Until then, nature was reducing and increasing CO2 based on the Milankovitch cycle, which is the wobbles that the Earth has around the sun. But if you look at the records, suddenly 6,000 years ago, the methane starts going up instead of going down. And the CO2 starts going up instead of going down. So we would have descended into an ice age, except that our ancestors started deforesting like crazy right, all over the world and started emitting methane by raising livestock and growing agriculture, rice especially. And we kept the temperature constant instead of going into an ice age. In fact, the estimate is that the amount of temperature increase that we caused by the agricultural revolution is greater than the temperature increase that we have caused in the industrial revolution. 1.7 degrees C versus 1 degree C. So this is why scientists will tell you that the Holocene era is the only era in the record where we have had a remarkably constant climate. As if by magic it happened. It didn't happen by magic. It was our ancestors who did it.
What is your opinion on population growth?
It's an issue. Anthony Pulaski, who is a paleobiologist, the fossils are telling you stories. He looks at those stories and he reconstructs what happened in the past. And what he said is that over the past 100,000 years, the biomass of vertebrates on the planet was roughly constant at around 200 million metric tons. Just the total weight of all the vertebrates, if you put together, is about 200 million metric tons. And then humans spread out of Africa and we started killing the big animals. And you see a dip in the 200 million metric tons. It comes down to about 150, 140. He calls that the quaternary extinction caused by human beings. And then, until 1700 AD, we slowly started increasing that back to 200 by increasing our biomass and by increasing the biomass of our livestock, because we are vertebrates too. Whereas wild vertebrates have been coming down. Since 1750, we have destroyed more forests, so we have killed a lot of the wild vertebrates. The population of human beings alone has gone up to 500 million metric tons. But the population of livestock is 1 billion metric tons. They're double our weight. They're double our weight, but that's actually telling only half the story. We eat 1.4 gigatons per year of dry matter biomass, and they eat 7 gigatons per year of dry matter biomass. So they eat 5 times as much as human beings in terms of raw weight. So they're only twice our weight, but they eat 5 times. Why is that? Because they're all babies. They're all growing really, really fast. But that is good news. Because when you go vegan, 7 gigatons will be released back to nature. So we can temporarily sustain our population of 7.4 billion or 9 billion for at least another 100, 200 years. And slowly bring the population back down where it should be. I also think that 200 million metric tons is an underestimate for today. Because Anthony Pulaski thinks that 200 million metric tons is probably all that the earth can support in terms of vertebrates. But I think it's mistaken, because if you look at the past 100,000 years, it was all ice age. So we came out of the ice age 12,000 years ago. And as we came out of the ice age, we started killing animals. So during the ice age, what happens is Canada is filled with ice. There are no animals when it's filled with ice. Chicago is filled with ice. Chicago has a mile of ice on top of its head. Ice spreads out from the north to the south. So the amount of land that's available for vertebrates to live on decreases. And in that, there were 200 million metric tons. So today, I really think the planet can support a lot more than 200 million metric tons. But I don't know how much. I have to ask him. I have to put that question to him and say, go figure out. What was it in the previous interglacial period.
Of the scientists that know all of these details, how many of them are supporting your cause?
This is the problem.
James Hansen should understand.
Scientists tend to be specialists. It's only systems people who can put things together. Okay? So really, someone with my background who can put things together. There are very few systems scientists who are looking at environment like I do. So in that sense, I'm telling a fairly unique story. I am going to talk to Jim Hansen and Michael Mann and all these climate scientists in December. We have a meeting where all these big climate scientists are coming together. A journalist who works for Climate Progress has arranged it. He wants my story to be told in front of them.
Do you think there's people trying to stop the animal rights movement?
They are, because they're scared that it's going to kill the system, right?
How do you think we could battle that?
Don't battle it. I mean, I tell people, everything you're doing is great. Just keep doing what you're doing and go vegan at the same time. The thing is, environmental activists and LGBT activists, activists for racism, all these activists are working towards sustainability. Everybody is working towards sustainability. Because equality is sustainable, inequality is not. Since all of us are working towards sustainability, the common theme is veganism. If we can all get to do veganism, if the animal rights people can go and actually help the LGBT activists, go and help the people who are fighting against racism, you go and join the feminists, you go and help them and then convince them to go vegan. You discover that you are much stronger than you think you are. Everyone is much stronger than they think they are, because right now we are all divided up into our own little things, we're trying to do. But we are all working towards the same overall cause. So I suggest next time you see a rally for feminism, join it and carry a banner.
Yeah, encourage people to go vegan. And we've seen a lot of vegan restaurants or any other kind of businesses. How do we deal with the people who became vegan and started a business, but their business isn't really in touch with other problems that we have?
Right.
And that's not just a matter of becoming vegan and you think that your role is done, you're all good to go, right? You have to be careful with the food you're eating or even clothing, but how is this made? What is the labor with? All these things cause harm in different areas, right?
So I'm not suggesting that all vegans are going to be good in every other issue. What I'm suggesting is that veganism is the common theme that should unite all of us. And you should tell people that even though you're vegan, look at where the chocolate came from. Look at how the cocoa was produced. Some poor child was made to be a slave to do that. So as you become more and more aware of this, you will become a minimalist.
Yeah.
You become a minimalist.
That's what we do.
Yeah. And that's great. That's really what the planet is saying we should become, right? It's saying, hey, listen, reduce your footprint.
Were kidnapped in Africa for the chocolate drop.
Yeah.
I posted about that.
But it's systemic, you see. Nestle buys from them.
Oh, yeah, they did all right.
Right. So then others have to do that. If they don't do that, they'll be selling chocolate at a more expensive price and they will have a smaller market.
Yeah, people are willing to buy fair trade chocolate, though. They're willing to spend more money because they know the horse story.
It's just you want your fix in the moment. You buy a chocolate bar at the dollar store and get that fix, as opposed to saving that $5 and then savoring that chocolate that you know is sourced from ethical.
I can just tell you what happened to me. My transformation is that I've been working on something that's larger than me. And so I have this inner drive and I really don't need happiness from any other source.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
So you don't need chocolate?
Okay, I draw the line there.
It's called sustainability from inside.
I realized I had to become minimalist. Even when I was writing Carbon Dharma, I was invited to join this Buy Nothing Day on Facebook. Day after Thanksgiving, everybody's running up to the stores to buy stuff. Crowds and crowds of people standing outside Walmart at 6 o'clock in the morning. I said, have we become so compulsive as buyers that we have to stop ourselves from buying on one day?
We kill other people, we hurt other people, so we can get a cheap TV.
I know.
Yeah.
Brainwash us to become consumers.
Right.
But you made a really good point, because I've had this discussion with a lot of my friends. I remember my last job, I was so unhappy. I hated everything in my life. And I remember coming home and I would go shopping just because of something to do, right? I realized since I've become vegan, I don't want things. All I spend my money on is animal rights stuff. on animal rights stuff. And just occasionally buy stuff, but I don't buy much. And I've talked to a lot of my friends who are vegan and activists, and they say the same thing.
Absolutely.
Do you know what that is? You have a purpose that's larger than yourself.
Yeah. I don't even watch TV.
I haven't watched TV in like 5 or 6 years.
That gives you the high, that gives you the happiness, so you don't seek it from anything else. I was just fortunate to be working on something where I was good at it. I was good at systems. So, I mean, this is the biggest systems problem around. I was sitting there trying to solve the systems problem, trying to figure out what it is. And after that buy nothing day, I said, I'm going to do a buy everything day, which is the day in which I buy everything I need. And the other 364 days, I buy nothing. And you know what? It works beautifully. Because the other days, I just note down what I think I need for the next purchase, right? And if I break something and I say, I have broken it, and usually someone comes and gives me a gift saying, here, take this. Like my son gave me these shoes because my shoes are so falling apart. I had holes underneath. And he said, Dad, you got to have a shoe.
How much is Gandhi's
Gandhi? See, Gandhi was a great systems thinker. That's why I admire him. He was trying to do this transformation from the caterpillar to the butterfly in 1900s, and he didn't succeed. I mean, he won the Khadi movement. He won that battle with the British.
The salt march and all.
Right, he won that, but eventually the British won. When the independence was granted to India, they divided India into two, and they just supplied us with guns so that we can kill each other. So Gandhi died and industrialization of India happened, so we are doing what the West wanted to do. He wasn't successful in that sense. So what I'm trying to do is learn from him, because there are some things he taught us that were beautiful. The power of individual action, how you can do cohesive individual action. Everyone does the same thing, then you have a huge impact. That's veganism. If everybody does that, then you're going to be powerful. They're scared to death of us. The government and the system is scared to death of vegans. Vegans, because as of 2010, about 3% of North Americans were self-reported to be vegan. Some of them maybe, may not be, right? But of that, 12% of millennials were vegan. Now, I consider the millennial generation that was born between 1980 and 2000, to be the most important generation that ever lived on earth. Because they are the ones who are going to make this transformation. And I see that happening. So 12% of millennials were self-reporting to be vegan in 2010. 4% of Gen Xers. And 1% of baby boomers. And if you go on Google, you can do Google Trends. To google.com/trends, and you look for the search term vegan, you will see it has exponentially increased since 2010. 2010 was like the knee, and then it's tripled since 2010. So if that continues for another 10, 12 years, it's going to sweep the world.
So tipping point.
Yeah, you're going to hit it. So I have a bet with a friend of mine that by 2026, half of North Americans will self-report to be vegan.
Wow.
and I tell him, and he says, you're out of your mind. I say, I am not out of my mind. I just understand arithmetic. I understand the exponential function.
You know what? I became vegan 3 years ago, and I became an activist shortly after that.
Right.
And I'm in the 1% of baby boomers.
Yes, there you go.
But it's been really interesting what you're saying about the millennials, because in the last year, the number of people in Toronto who've been activists who are young is just growing phenomenally, and it's so exciting, because your generation is the generation that's going to change the world, not my generation.
We're just trying to rework away from all the damage though.
No, it's true. I absolutely
And it's just
agree with you.
revolution
Yes.
And so many more young people join us. It's just amazing.
But give us some credit, okay, in the sense that we built a lot of technology. I mean, I worked on the internet like crazy, okay, so I really did.
The only part that I'm kind of worried about it is how technology gives you a lot of important tools and a way to mobilize more people.
Exactly.
It just keep you in a safe zone so you don't go out and actually take over institutions and put people out to actually do something.
You don't want to do that right now, okay? Because this is why I think what is happening is the best thing that could possibly happen. Let Hillary win. I don't want Trump winning, but I also don't want Sanders winning, because Sanders is talking about doing radical things, which means he'll collapse the system. If you listen to Obama, Obama is a very smart man. You say, doesn't he understand this? I see him go to Alaska and look at how the methane is bubbling up, and he knows it's going to hurt his children. Does he love money more than he loves his children? Excuse me. It's hard to sell a story like that, okay? It's not true. If you listen to him, One time somebody asked him about Donald Trump, and he said, I don't think the American people will elect him, because being a president is not an easy job. And he said, so when you're a president, you have access to nuclear codes. You have to make sure that the banking system does not collapse. That was the second thing he said. Make sure that the banking system does not collapse. And then 20 other countries are calling you. See, they've got problems, big problems, and they are expecting you to do something about it. Right? So he's really the president of the world. Literally, he has to do things that is keeping the world economy stable. If he says, I'm only interested in the US economy, let the world economy go to hell, the US economy is going to come down too. Right? He knows that. Like Sanders says, all you have to do is forgive their loans and they'll have big jobs and the economy will grow 6%. If the US economy grows 6% per year, the other countries are going to kill you. Kill the US, because they're going to say, are you out of your mind? You're using up all the resources for yourself. You're already 7 times larger than what the planet can support. You want us to suffer more so that your economy can grow? This is why he is figuring out ways to reduce the wages in the US and increase the wages in Vietnam and places like that. He's got all this TPP. Look at TPP. Read the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
He says it's very important.
It's very important. It is very important for him. It's very important to keep the current system going, okay? Because if you read the TPP, it is so egregious.
Oh yeah, it's basically a license to pollute and rape and pillage and corporatocracy completely.
Right, but there is no other way he sees to grow the economy, okay? So he's going to have to figure out a way to keep the economy kind of stable without growing too much. That's what the earth is saying you need right now.
Maybe not suddenly collapse it. You were saying build a system while this is going on.
Right, yeah. So this is why if you collapse right now, it's very hard for us to build the other system. But the other system can be built very quickly also, because it's also an exponential process. That's why we need to get going on that very quickly.
But a collapse would lead to fascism, undoubtedly. It always does, right?
Always
because
does, yeah.
People panic,
right.
And they start to blame, and then they look for a leader.
Right.
That's what always happens.
What always happens, right? But now, in the Bitcoin era, you can actually create infrastructure and hand it over to people and give it away to people, that they can say, I don't have to do that. I just take that, put it in here, and I'm part of this big network. I'm part of a big functioning network. That's how the Ethernet worked, by the way.
Yeah.
See, when I was doing the internet, there was a big debate between top-down internet and distributed internet. And all the telephone companies wanted a top-down internet.
And they still do. They still are fighting for control.
Because they lost.
Yeah.
In the 90s, they lost. Okay? They were doing something called ATM, asynchronous transfer mode. And the small companies were doing something called Ethernet. I had a small company at that point. And my marketing guy told me, go to both. I don't care who wins, go to both. So I was going and presenting over there. I was presenting standards options over there. I was presenting standards options over here. And I won both. So they took my ATM 155 and they took my 100 base T2 here. And then I saw that these guys were working in gigabit in Ethernet. And I said, hey, I can do a gigabit on the same cable that you have. And they told me, you're an idiot. We are having trouble getting 100 megabit to work and you're telling me you can do a gigabit? And I said, I assure you I can do this. They said, well, we'll let you play. So they gave me a study group and let me play. That became gigabit Ethernet and the internet took off, right? Because Ethernet took off. And these guys, they were still looking at 155 megabit. And they collapsed. Right? And this one, ATM, in order to send a message from your computer to somebody else, let's send it like an email, you had to first send a message to the server and get a routing from there, and that will tell you exactly which computer you should send it to, and that's how it goes. Because that's how telephones were made, right? Yeah. That's how they wanted the internet to be.
Very clogged, bottleneck.
Yeah. Well, they claimed it would be better than this freewheeling stuff that they were doing in the Ethernet. Ethernet, it was, you want to send something, send it. And I will figure out where it's going to go and send it over there. It's not mine. Send it over there. And it just zooms around in the world and suddenly it gets to the right place. And it works. And it is indestructible. Because you take one node out, you automatically send to somebody else. Whereas there in ATM, if something goes down, your entire routing has to be redone. Distributed one.